There are things in this world that crawl, slither, and fly, but some of the most unsettling are those that walk, especially at night. You see, we're wired to recognize certain patterns, a human gait, a human shape. But what if something else mimicked that? Something that shouldn't walk upright, yet does. These are 5 terrifying accounts of real people who encountered beings that moved like us, walked like us, but weren't us. Encounters that left behind footprints, but no explanation. So if you've ever heard footsteps outside your window long after midnight, maybe you weren't imagining it. Turn off the lights, listen closely. Let's begin. Story 1, The Thing Under the Bridge. When I was 13, my family moved to a small town in northern Oregon, one of those places with only 2 gas stations, a single grocery store, and more pine trees than people. Our house sat just outside of town, on a quiet road that curved along the edge of the forest. A shallow river ran behind our backyard, and further down was a rusted old bridge that crossed it, just wide enough for 1 car at a time. It was the kind of bridge that groaned under weight, a structure so old it had become part of the landscape. Locals called it Deadwater Crossing. I never liked the name. One overcast October afternoon, I rode my bike down to the bridge, hoping to kill time before dinner. The river below gurgled lazily, and dead leaves floated along its surface. I parked my bike at the edge and leaned over the side, tossing a stick into the water and watching it drift away. That's when I noticed it, a shape beneath the bridge. At first, I thought it was a person crouching. It had a vaguely human outline, 2 arms, 2 legs, but it was all wrong. The limbs were too long, the back arched unnaturally, and the head, it tilted upward as though it knew I was there. I didn't see eyes, but I felt watched. Frozen, I stayed there, not breathing, until the thing moved. It didn't crawl or walk. It glided backward, vanishing into the shadows beneath the bridge. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't even tell my older sister, Sarah, who normally would have laughed it off anyway. Instead, I avoided the bridge for a few weeks, riding my bike in the other direction, pretending it hadn't happened. But one night, just before Halloween, everything changed. It was late, around 11:30 p.m. I was awake in bed, scrolling through music on my iPod when I heard it. A wet slap against the pavement. At first, I thought it was rain, but it was dry outside. Then I thought maybe an animal, but the footsteps were deliberate. 2 of them, like someone barefoot was walking slowly up our driveway. I peeked out the window. At first, nothing, just the pale moon casting long shadows over the pine trees. Then I saw it, just past the mailbox, heading toward our house. Tall, emaciated, and hunched. Its arms were too long, and its head lolled to one side like a broken doll. It walked like a person, but only in the sense that it knew how people walked. Something about the rhythm was rehearsed. Wrong. It paused at the edge of the yard, then dropped down, low, animalistic, and began crawling toward the house. I couldn't scream. I couldn't breathe. I dropped to the floor and rolled under my bed, heart hammering in my ears. I don't remember how long I lay there. Maybe an hour, maybe more. I didn't hear it come inside. I didn't hear it leave, but when I finally crawled back out, the carpet beneath my window was wet. 2 smeared, muddy footprints stared back at me. I finally told Sarah. She said I was dreaming, or maybe hallucinating. But she agreed to bike down to the bridge with me the next day, just to prove it was nothing. We went after school. The sky was dull and gray, and the air had that smell of wet leaves and wood smoke. We parked our bikes and approached the bridge. Sarah leaned over and shouted, "Hello, creepy riverman?" I was too tense to laugh. I kept scanning the shadows beneath the bridge. That's when we heard the growl. It didn't sound animal. It sounded like someone trying to be an animal. Then from underneath, a pale hand reached up, fingers too long, nails like yellowed claws. It gripped the metal beam just below the railing. Then another hand. Then a face. Or what was left of a face. Its skin was stretched thin over bone, like it had been drained dry. Its mouth was too wide, split ear to ear, and it gnashed rows of tiny, crooked teeth as it pulled itself up. But what terrified me most were the eyes, sunken, lidless, and gray like moldy glass. Sarah screamed. We both ran, bikes forgotten, straight through the woods and didn't stop until we were at the back door of our house. My mom grounded us for leaving the bikes, but I didn't care. I was alive. That night, I heard it again. The same slap, the same slow, barefoot gait. Only this time, it stopped outside Sarah's window. I heard her scream from the other room, and our parents came running. But by the time they got there, it was gone. Only a handprint remained, long, clawed, and dripping something dark we hoped was mud. We never went back to the bridge. My dad took the bikes the next morning and brought them home. Sarah refused to sleep alone for weeks. I started carrying a flashlight everywhere, even in daylight. Years later, I moved out, went to college, built a life far away from Deadwater Crossing. But every now and then, usually around October, I'll wake in the middle of the night to a sound I can't quite explain. A wet slap on concrete. Faint. Distant. I don't live near a bridge, but sometimes I think it found me anyway. Story 2. The Jogger on Hollow Road. Hollow Road got its name for a reason. The street curved through a wooded stretch between two rural townships, framed by crooked trees whose bare limbs reached out like fingers. There were no streetlights, no sidewalks, just cracked asphalt, tree roots breaking through the edges, and the occasional ditch flooded after rain. Local kids called it the Throat. Narrow, dark, and easy to get swallowed in. I'd moved back to my hometown after college, renting a small fixer-upper about a half-mile off Hollow Road. It was cheap, quiet, and nestled far enough from town to give me peace. I liked it that way. I'd picked up the habit of jogging after work. Short 3-mile loops, sometimes through Hollow if the weather was nice and the sun hadn't set yet. That's where I first saw her. It was a Tuesday evening in late September. The air had that strange in-between feel. Summer light, but with the bite of coming fall. I was nearing the halfway point on my run, earbuds in, when I saw a woman jogging up ahead. From behind, she looked normal. Dark ponytail, red hoodie, black running tights. She ran steadily, but something about her pace felt off, like every step was perfectly timed. No bounce, no fatigue. Mechanical. As I approached, I noticed something else. She didn't seem to be breathing hard. No huffing, no swaying arms, just movement. I slowed my pace to match hers. "Hey," I said casually, waving as I passed on the left. She didn't respond, didn't even glance at me. I looked over my shoulder. Her face was blank, not expressionless, blank. Smooth skin where her eyes, nose, and mouth should have been. Just the soft curve of a featureless mask, pale as bone, bouncing gently with each step. I nearly tripped. Heart racing, I yanked out my earbuds and turned around. She was gone. No footsteps, no rustle. The road behind me was completely empty. I sprinted the rest of the way home and locked every door. I didn't sleep well that night. I kept telling myself I imagined it, a trick of the light, a shadow, anything. But in the pit of my stomach, I knew what I saw. The next morning, I skipped my jog. I told myself I'd get back to it the day after, but I didn't. That night, around 11 p.m., I took out the trash. My driveway was long and cracked, ending at a gravel road that led back to Hollow. As I dragged the bin down, I caught movement from the corner of my eye. Someone was jogging in place by the tree line. Red hoodie, black tights, no face. I dropped the bin and bolted inside. Curtains drawn, doors locked, lights off. For hours, I sat at the window, staring into the dark. She never came closer, just jogged in place at the edge of the woods, arms pumping in rhythm, silent, unnatural. She was gone by morning. I tried to rationalize it. Stress, trauma, maybe a vivid hallucination. But over the next week, it happened again. Every night, always at the edge of the woods, always jogging, always watching. Then she moved closer. It was a Friday. I stayed home from work. My nerves were shot, and the bags under my eyes had gone from mild to monstrous. Around 10 p.m., I peeked out the window. She was halfway up the driveway, still jogging in place, still featureless. And now, faster. Her arms swung wider. Her legs kicked harder. Like she was building momentum. Like she was getting ready to run straight at me. I backed away from the window and called the police. When the deputy arrived, I met him on the porch, hands shaking. "She's out there," I whispered. "The woman. She's in my yard." He scanned the trees with a flashlight. "Nobody's here, sir." I knew he wouldn't find her. I could feel her disappear every time someone else came near. He gave me a skeptical look and offered to drive around the property. I said no. I didn't want him out there alone. Whatever she was, she didn't like being seen. That night, I boarded up the windows. 2 days passed with no sightings. I thought maybe I'd broken the cycle. Maybe she gave up. Then I found the footprint. It was on my porch, bare, wet, and facing the door. I left town the next morning. I moved into my cousin's basement 3 hours south, refused to go back for the rest of my things. I told him bits and pieces, left out the face or lack thereof. But he could see I wasn't joking. For the first few weeks, everything was quiet. Then one night, while walking to my car, I heard footsteps. Jogging. I turned. There she was, at the end of the cul-de-sac. Same red hoodie. Same perfect stride. Only this time, her head was tilted, like she was listening. She stopped, slowly turned toward me, and though her face was still smooth and blank, I swear she smiled. Story 3. The cemetery stride. I used to take nightly walks to clear my head. Quiet time was rare in my life. Between work, bills, and the constant buzz of my phone, I needed at least 30 minutes each night where I could exist in silence. That's why I started walking near the old cemetery at the edge of town. It wasn't a creepy place, at least not at first. The wrought iron fence was rusted and crooked in places, but the lawn was surprisingly well kept. Some nights, a thin mist would hang low over the ground, glowing softly in the moonlight like a sheet of silk. It was peaceful in a morbid sort of way. No one else walked there, especially not after dark. And I liked that. The cemetery sat across from a narrow path through the woods, a shortcut that locals called Widow's Path. It was an old trail, used decades ago when the town was smaller, but these days it was overgrown and nearly forgotten. The few who still talked about it spoke in hushed tones, mostly kids daring each other to walk it on Halloween. One Tuesday night in early October, I walked the usual loop around the cemetery's edge. The sky was clear, stars bleeding through the dark like pinholes in fabric. I had just passed the rusted northern gate when I heard footsteps behind me. Light. Quick. Rhythmic. At first I thought it was just another late-night walker, maybe someone else discovering the solitude of the place. I turned around to smile. There was no one there. I stopped walking, listened, silence. Then, crunch, crunch, crunch. The sound again, footsteps, fast and steady, pacing just behind me. Except when I turned, again, there was no one. I laughed nervously and kept walking. Probably a deer, or my imagination. Maybe I was too wound up from work, but the sound followed. For 10 minutes, every step I took was mirrored by another pair of feet that never showed themselves. I sped up, so did they. I stopped, so did they. Always just out of view, always one step behind. By the time I reached my car parked near the cemetery gate, I was sweating cold. I told myself not to turn around, just unlock the door and get in. And I did. But as I pulled out of the lot, my headlights swept across the far end of the cemetery. There was a man standing by a headstone, perfectly still, dressed in black. And even from that distance, I could see something was wrong with how he was leaning. Like his spine was bent the wrong way, like he wasn't standing so much as hanging in place. The next night, I avoided the cemetery, took a different path through town, well lit, lots of traffic, people out walking dogs. I told myself the man was a mourner, maybe drunk or grieving, that the footsteps were animals or tricks of sound bouncing off trees. But then the dreams started. In them, I walked through the cemetery alone. Always the same path, always the same sound, footsteps behind me. Only in the dream, when I turned, I did see someone. A man in a black suit, too tall, skin the color of wet ash. No eyes, just deep sockets. And when I tried to run, he would follow, arms swinging like broken branches, legs bending at wrong angles, sprinting faster than any human should, chasing me until I tripped. And then I'd wake up. Every night, for a week straight, the same dream. I stopped walking at night altogether, slept with lights on, music playing, anything to block out the sound of phantom footsteps. On the 8th night, I got a knock at my door around 2 a.m. I froze. No one knocks at 2 a.m. Peeking through the blinds, I saw no one on the porch. But as I backed away, I noticed something smeared across the glass. A handprint. Large. Pale. Fingers too long. I called the cops. They found no signs of forced entry, no tracks, nothing. But I knew what I'd seen. And deep down, I knew what was coming next. I decided to visit the cemetery one last time. I wanted closure. Maybe if I faced it, walked the loop in full daylight, it would break the spell. I took a friend with me, Mark, always the rational type. I didn't tell him everything, just enough to get him curious. We walked the loop together, and for a while, it was normal. Just graves, trees, and the occasional crow. But when we passed the northern gate, I felt it again, that presence. Mark went quiet too. "You feel that?" he asked. "Yeah," I whispered, "like we're being watched." Then we heard it, Crunch, 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 footsteps. We turned in unison, nothing. "Let's go," he said, now. We moved fast, barely talking, just focused on getting to the car. As we approached the gate, Mark froze. I followed his gaze. There, by the headstone at the far end, stood the man in black. Except now, in daylight, he was worse. His mouth hung open in a perfect circle, like he was screaming silently. His arms dangled too low, hands dragging the ground. His eyes, gone, just pits of black. But somehow he saw us. Then he stepped forward, not walked, slid, like his feet weren't touching the ground. We didn't wait to see more. We ran. Mark doesn't talk about it anymore. He moved out of town a month later. I haven't stepped foot near that cemetery since. But sometimes, when I walk past reflective surfaces, mirrors, windows, even puddles, I hear it again. Crunch, 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 footsteps, always behind me, always closer than they should be. Story 4, the thing in the driveway. It started with the floodlight. Around 2:47 a.m., every single night, my driveway's motion-activated floodlight would flick on. I live alone, and my house is at the end of a quiet, dead-end road, surrounded by woods. No cars ever pass through. No neighbors walking dogs. Nothing but trees, gravel, and stillness. So the first time it happened, I figured it was an animal. A raccoon, maybe a fox. I checked the window, didn't see anything, and went back to bed. But the next night, the light came on again. Same time, 2:47 a.m. I got up, checked the window, and again, nothing. Not a branch moving. No wind. Just that harsh white light pouring over the gravel driveway like a spotlight on an empty stage. I decided to check the floodlight sensor the next morning. Maybe it was faulty. Maybe a moth kept flying into it. But the sensor was fine. No sign of damage or debris. And it was oddly clean. Too clean back, like someone had wiped it down. The third night, I set up a camera. Just a basic, motion-triggered cam pointed at the driveway. I figured if there was something out there, animal or not, it would catch it. When the light came on at exactly 2:47 a.m. again, I got out of bed and checked the live feed on my phone. Black screen. Camera was offline. The next morning, I found it smashed. Torn from the tree I'd mounted it on. The plastic cracked like it had been struck with a hammer. The SD card was missing. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't an animal. That night, I didn't sleep. I made coffee, pulled a chair to the front window, and waited. 2:30 a.m., then 2:40, then 2:45. The yard was still. At 2:47, the light flicked on. And there it was, something standing in the driveway. At first, I thought it was a person. Tall, thin, dressed in some kind of tattered gray cloth. But the longer I stared, the less human it looked. Its head was wrong, too narrow, too long, with something like a snout that ended in a black twitching tip. It had no visible eyes. Just smooth, sagging skin stretched over its skull like melted wax. Its limbs were uneven. One arm hung nearly to the ground while the other twitched at the elbow like it had a broken hinge. And the worst part? It was facing the window. It knew I was watching. I wanted to move, but I couldn't. I sat frozen, gripping the armrests of the chair, barely breathing. Then it started to walk. No, not walk, glide. Its feet didn't lift. It slid forward in small jerks like a glitching puppet. It didn't make a sound, not even gravel crunching. I backed away from the window, ran to my room, locked the door. I didn't sleep that night. When the sun rose, I crept outside. Nothing was there. No footprints, no drag marks, just that same quiet gravel and a busted camera. I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? Something with a wax head and a broken arm keeps showing up at 2:47 every night? Instead, I drove to the next town and bought a new camera. High-end this time. Wireless. Hidden in a birdhouse facing the driveway. I set it to upload footage directly to the cloud. That night, I didn't watch from the window. I stayed in bed, covers pulled to my chin, holding my phone like a weapon. When the floodlight came on, again at 2:47, I checked the stream. The screen was black. Again. But this time the feed wasn't offline. It was recording. Only, the driveway was gone. It was just black, as if something was blocking the lens. Then the camera adjusted. The blackness shifted, and I realized it wasn't darkness. It was skin. Something had wrapped itself around the camera, pressed up so close I could see the texture, thin gray flesh, pulsing slightly. And then a hole opened in the center of the screen. A mouth. Toothless. Wet. Stretching open like it was tasting the lens. I screamed and shut the app. In the morning, the birdhouse was intact. No signs of damage. But the inside, empty. The camera was gone. I found the footage in the cloud, but it ended at 2:48 a.m., right when the mouth opened. I didn't know what to do. I stayed with my sister for a few nights. She thought I was having a breakdown, said I'd been overworked and needed sleep. I wanted to believe her. God, I tried to believe her, until she called me on the third night. She was sobbing. "He's here," she said. "Outside. The thing you saw. It's in my driveway." I drove like a madman. Got there just after 3 a.m. The floodlight over her garage was broken, glass shattered, bulb torn out. She hadn't imagined it. It was following me, or worse, attached to me. I moved. 2 towns over, new job, new phone, new everything. For a while it worked. No lights, no sightings, no dreams. Until last night. At 2:47 a.m., the bedroom light flicked on. Not the hallway light, not the driveway, my bedroom. And standing in the corner just behind the open door, something with skin like wet wax, watching. Story 5, The Campground Visitor. It was supposed to be a simple father-son camping trip, just me and my 12-year-old son, Evan, spending a weekend off-grid before school started again. We chose Pine Hollow Campground, a little-known site deep in the northern Appalachians. No phone signal, no people, just forest, firewood, and freedom. The ranger at the check-in station was an older man with a lazy eye and a limp. He was polite, but when he handed me the map, his hand lingered over Site 9 longer than necessary. "You're headed to 9?" he asked without looking at me directly. I nodded. "Yeah, it's the most secluded one, right?" "It is," he said, then paused. "But sometimes folks hear things at night up there. Sounds carry different in that part of the woods." I laughed it off, assuming he was just trying to spook tourists. Evan, of course, was thrilled. "Maybe we'll see Bigfoot," he said, practically bouncing in the passenger seat. The site was perfect. Flat ground, tall trees, a wide clearing, and no other campers in sight. We set up our tent, built a fire, roasted hot dogs, and watched the stars blink on one by one. At around 10:30 p.m., Evan went into the tent to read comics by flashlight while I sat by the fire sipping beer. The woods around us were still, except for the occasional hoot of an owl or the crack of a twig. It was the kind of silence you don't get anywhere near civilization. Then, somewhere behind me, I heard something strange. Not an animal, not wind. It was whistling, 3 notes. Slow, tuneless, like someone trying to mimic a lullaby but forgetting the melody. I turned in my chair, scanning the tree line. "Hello?" I called out. Nothing. I stood up, grabbed my flashlight, and swept the beam across the woods. The sound had stopped. Probably just another camper messing around, I thought, though I hadn't seen anyone else since we arrived. Still, I stayed up a little longer than usual that night, waiting for the whistling to return. It didn't. The next morning, Evan said he didn't hear anything. We spent the day hiking a loop trail and returned to camp in good spirits. I didn't think much about the noise after that, until night fell again. We had just zipped ourselves into the tent when it started. 3 whistles. Same pattern. Same eerie slowness. This time, it was closer. Evan looked at me, wide-eyed. "Is someone out there?" "Probably just another camper being weird," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Stay here." I stepped out with my flashlight again, but this time I brought my hatchet too. The fire had burned low. I scanned the perimeter. Nothing moved. Nothing made a sound. "Hey!" I called into the trees. "This isn't funny." Silence. Then, just as I turned to head back toward the tent, the whistle again, right behind me. I spun around, light shaking, heart thudding, but there was nothing. No one. I didn't sleep much that night. The third night is when everything went wrong. We debated packing up and heading home early, but Evan wanted to stay. "What if it's just animals, or wind blowing through something weird?" he said. I didn't believe that, but I didn't want to scare him. We stayed. That evening, I built a bigger fire than usual. I sharpened the hatchet and set it next to me. Evan stayed in the tent with the zipper slightly open so he could watch me through the mesh. By midnight, I had almost convinced myself nothing would happen. I had even started to doze off in my chair when I heard the crunch of footsteps. Deliberate, measured, coming from the woods directly ahead. I froze. No whistle this time, just walking. Then, from the darkness beyond the firelight, a shape appeared. At first, I thought it was a person, but it moved wrong. Its limbs were too long, arms hanging down past the knees. It didn't walk so much as sway, like it had to remember how legs worked. Its head tilted far to the left, as if it were listening for something on the ground. I couldn't see its face clearly, but its eyes, God, its eyes caught the firelight and glowed like wet marbles. It stood just outside the ring of firelight, watching. Then it whistled. 3 notes. I backed up slowly toward the tent. Evan was staring through the mesh, eyes wide with horror. I held a finger to my lips, signaling him not to make a sound. The thing stepped forward, 1 foot into the light. Its skin was pale, almost gray, and stretched tightly over its bones. It was barefoot. Its hands were too large, fingers curled and twitching. Its mouth hung slightly open, like it didn't know what to do with it. I raised the hatchet. It stopped, tilted its head the other way. Then it did something I'll never forget. It mimicked my voice. "Evan," it said, perfectly, like a tape recording. "Come out now." My blood froze. Evan whimpered. I shouted, "Stay inside." The creature took another step, but this time I lunged, swinging the hatchet as hard as I could. It didn't scream. It didn't even flinch. It just retreated into the woods with that same swaying gait, disappearing into the trees like smoke. We packed up in less than 10 minutes, left the tent behind, drove through the night until we saw streetlights. I called the ranger station in the morning, told them everything. The man on the phone went quiet, then asked me, was it whistling? "Yes," I said. "3 notes? Yes." He sighed. "We try not to assign it to one site. It moves around. Has for years. You weren't the first. You won't be the last." "What is it?" Another pause. "Not sure it ever was human. I haven't been camping since. Neither has Evan. But sometimes when it's late and the house is quiet, I swear I hear it again." 3 slow, off-key whistles from somewhere in the backyard. Not everything that walks under the veil of night is meant to be seen. Sometimes the darkness hides things that don't belong in our world. Things that mimic, stalk, or simply exist outside our understanding. For those who've glimpsed them, the night is no longer peaceful. It's a place of waiting footsteps, of shadows that watch from just beyond the light. The stories we've shared tonight aren't warnings. They're reminders. If you hear footsteps where there should be none, don't follow. And whatever you do, never ever call out to it.